This video will deal strictly with pivot tables. Here's some of the concepts and topics I want to work through. I'm going to show you how to convert a data table to a pivot table. We'll label some fields, we'll add some fields through the add calculated field option, we'll format fields, we'll add a running total, and I'll probably add some other things along the way, but the goal is to try to give you everything you'll need to work through this portion of the teaching case. So let me take us back to here. In the last video I showed you how to work with data tables, and so what we've got here is the data table I created in that last video, which, just a quick refresher again, we're a vendor, we're buying stuff from a vendor. We're buying either wood, steel, or plastic, and we use 3 different vendors. We have dates we purchase stuff, how much we pay, the cost we pay for this item, and then we get various discounts. We get a cash discount, vendor discount, and we have total discount. So we know the real cost of buying the wood or the plastic or the steel is what we the invoiced amount minus the cash discount minus the vendor discount to give us the total. Okay, so again, this has like 300 records in it, which is a lot of data. So if I want to know how much I'm spending with any one particular vendor or how much wood I'm buying in total, you could go through this table and try to figure it out. But a pivot, that's really the function of the pivot table, is to summarize massive amounts of data and to be able to quickly visualize what's going on. So to take a data table and to turn it into a pivot table, you go up to here, you click on Insert Pivot Table, and it's going to ask you for a range, and usually it will highlight if you have this thing inserted as a data table, which you should have already. Then it'll bring it in automatically, or you can type in the name of the table, which it's already pulling it in here as a default table. I hit OK, and here's my pivot table. Very ugly at this point, doesn't have much, but now what you're able to do is pull. Here are all the fields listed that are in that data table that we created. Each one has its own unique record here. So if I want to now start to build my pivot table, you got to think about, what do I want this thing to look like? And in your case, you're working through this case and you're trying to summarize by customer and by sales channel. So maybe parallel here, vendor, I'm buying stuff from a vendor as opposed to selling it to a customer. If I pull that field down and I drag it to this row section, the rows are what's going to populate, what we would call the y-axis. So it's going to summarize all of the A, B, and C vendors, and then I need to pull over like the data I want to look at. So the invoiced cost, I can pull that. That's one of the fields in the data table, and I'll pull it over to this values function. The values function will then populate how much. So it's summarizing by each vendor now the total invoiced amount I received. And you can see this is a very ugly number. It brings across a very bland, kind of meaningless label, and so we're going to change all of that eventually. So that tells me now how much I have been invoiced by each vendor, which is helpful. But let's say I want to know, like, how much wood did I buy from A versus B versus C, or how much plastic. I can take, and I'd have to find that field in the table, and here I know it's substrate. And if I want it to show up here on the label field, I have to drag it down to the rows section and drop it. So watch what I do here, and you'll see then that it summarized all the steel, the wood, and the plastic that I bought from each of the 3 vendors. So depending on what you're using or trying to get out of the data, this is a very easy way to summarize it. Let's say I didn't really care about the vendor. I wanted to know how much of each item I bought. I just switched this substrate with the vendor here, just dragging it up and letting it go. You see what that did is it summarized it then by substrate, and it tells me then I bought 417,000 of plastic and how much I spent with each vendor. Okay, so that's just some real basic how to I'll get rid of this substrate thing because I don't need it for our purposes. So I can drag it and remove it too. If I put something there I didn't want to, I can bring it back up there and let go, and it disappears. So let's go ahead and first I'll show you how to format these. We don't want someone looking at this and trying to use this to make decisions off of or manage off of. This number is ugly. We have a responsibility to give them good, clean data that's easy to read and that makes sense. So I'm gonna right click on any one of these numbers, and I'm going to go to this number format, and here I'm going to pick what I want it to show up as, and here's $1. So I'll just use the accounting function, and your data table will get very long. It'll have a lot of data in it. So I would suggest you probably don't even round out to any decimal points. It's enough for us to just see how that's a lot cleaner, and I don't want the decimal points. It's meaningless. Whether it's 1 penny or 99 pennies doesn't matter really to me when I'm looking at the data. So that formats the cell. Let's say I wanted to change, I ask you to change the labels for the columns, because this doesn't really tell me much. Maybe I just would put something like something more descriptive, invoiced amount, and you can see then that it carries it through. You'll notice that that portion of the pivot table just disappeared. I have to click back on here and it shows back up. One other thing you should probably do up here is where you can go in, and you see how it's purple here. You can go in and change functions or items relative to the pivot table if you click on either one of these. I'm going to click on design, and you'll see some of the things that pop up here. If I click on analyze, it's kind of off to the side here. You can barely see it, but this has pivot table name, and it's going to default with pivot table 1, 2, 3, or 4. Let's change that to something meaningful. In your case, I don't know, customer profit or something like that. So vendor analysis. Alright, so let's say that what I'm trying to do with this pivot table is to determine how much I'm really going to have to pay. Maybe I'm trying to put forth some sort of a cash flow, cash expenditure forecast, and I just knowing the invoiced amount doesn't help me because I get discounts. So I can go through and pull in. I'd have to find the cash discounts, the dollar amount, and I'm going to pull that over to the values field, and it populates how much the cash discounts are. And I get vendor discounts as well, so I pull that over, and so there are my vendor discounts. And I could pull over the total discounts, and it populates that as well. Let me move this out of the way. So I would want to go through and format these the way we formatted those. I'm not going to show you that again. You should have good labels here, not just sum of. That's sloppy. And so let's say now that I want to add a field that's not listed here for me to pull down. So for example, in your data table your pivot table you're creating for me, you're going to need to tell me, well, how much is this percentage of the cash discounts relative to the invoice total. I go up here to, I think it's design, let's analyze, I guess, and here this fields, items, and sets. If I click on this, I can add a calculated field. So I'm going to click add calculated field, and I can name the field. I'm going to say this is a percentage of, this is the cash discounts percentage, something like that. And now here's where I define what I want it to do. I want to know this amount as a percentage of the total invoiced amount. You're going to have to do that for me when you're calculating the discount percentages for the customer. So I'm going to take this sum of the cash discount dollar amount and divide it by the total invoiced amount, which was the cost. That was the field name. I hit OK, and it popped in here at the end, kind of out of the sequence here. This amount as a percentage. You would want to again go in and format this. You could go to number formatting again, and I want percentage, and I'd probably maybe want to take it out 2 decimals. Hit OK, and you can see it formatted that. Now you can see this is, I want this to be next to the sum of cash discounts because that's what it's really related to. You can go down here and move any of these fields around. So if I go sum of cash discounts percentage and I want to move it up next to its friend, there, it moved it quite nicely. And I could do that with each of these. So that's how you add a calculated field. If you want to do it, have it create a percentage. You format the cells. Let's see, what else do we want to do here? You could go in here to the design and change how this table looks. We've got a lot of different options. I don't care which one you pick. It should be a little, it just needs to be easy for the reader to look at and understand. I'll just pick this one just because. Okay, so now one other critical element I need to show you quick here, and trying not to make this video too terribly long, is you need to be able to add what we call a running total. So it's good to know that, let me just see here. So we don't really have the real cost. So the real cost here, we added a calculated field into our data table that took and it calculated the real cost. The real cost was the amount we were invoiced minus these discounts. So this is how much we're really paying. Let me just format that because it's bothering me. We're really paying this amount. But when you're working with the customer accounting stuff, you're going to have to add up a total profit column, a running total. So let's say I want to know what my real cost is as these increment as I go from A to B. I want it to add the 374 to the 389 and I'll and display right here. So I want to have a running total column that shows me this amount. This amount would pop over here, but then when I get down to here, I want it to add the next data set to it. So it should be 374 plus 389, and subsequently each row adds to it. The way that one way you can do that, probably other ways to do it, I can bring across this sum of real cost number again, and if I bring that down, I could add this 100 times if I wanted to. It's going to keep adding the same data here, but I want this to not be just a straight dollar amount. I want it to be a running total. If I right click on this, it's kind of out of the way. Let me move some of this so you can see it. Hold on. If I right click on this and I go down to show value as, and I just go down to here where it says running total in, and let me just see if this works. Yeah, so running total in, and when I did that, show value as running total in, it asked me what's the base field. Well, I want to, so in other words, you're telling it to do a formula here where you're going to add the number in the prior field on a change of this row label. So when it sees that it's changing to a B, it's going to go ahead and add the totals together. So I'm going to click OK, right click, I'm going to format that number into an accounting. We'll get rid of 2 decimals. And you can see now this 374, we get down to the next one, it adds 389 to the 374, and it gives me a running total of the amount I'm going to be spending. Now, let me try to tell you why that's important. You're going to need that as you're working through your case. Again, here would be the output of your case, something similar to this. And what this orange line is this is the running total profit of all the customers. So each individual customer has its profit amount, and that's the blue bar here, and it almost disappears. That would be equivalent to this amount, like the real cost, and each customer has its own value. But I want to also plot the total customer profit, this orange line, and that's this running total. When you get to that point on your pivot table, you need a field that has the running total so that you can then have it show up in the chart. Okay, I don't know that I'm missing anything else. I think one other thing you should be able to or be aware of is you can like sort these numbers, and you're going to want to do that for when you get to this point. You're going to want the customers that had the largest profit showing up first, so that you get this nice curve effect of the Pareto chart. And the way you do that is you click on this, and it allows you to have many different sort options. I want to sort. I can click more sort options here, and I'm going to tell it to sort from the descending value, so from the largest value to the smallest value on this sum of real cost. Sum of real cost, the first one, and you'll watch this will basically reverse itself. And see how that happened, and what that does now, if you do that for your data, is it puts the largest profited customers up front, and so you'll get a nice distribution based off of the largest incremental profit changes at the beginning of the chart. Oh, I hope that's enough. If not, send me some emails if you're getting stuck in spots. But that's a really quick 15-minute interview or introduction, I should say, to pivot tables and how they work. So when you're working through your data, you should have several pivot tables, 2 to be specific. One for the customer data, so you should have one that lists all the customers, and then one for the sales channel that lists the for sales channel and all the subsequent data. Okay, good luck.